architect with Vision+Architecture Studio, and I'm joined here today by Abigail Katsoulis, project manager here on my team at Vision+, and Fiona Matthews, AIA, and Dallas studio lead for Shapiro and Company Architects out of Memphis, Tennessee. Today Abigail oversees our projects and collaborates with clients, consultants, and contractors to ensure our project success. With a background in multifamily design and construction, she excels in client relationships and team coordination, and is driven by the power of architecture to shape our communities and enhance lives. Fiona, with 15 years of success in the multifamily industry, Fiona is an accomplished architect and dedicated community advocate. She was born in Montreal and grew up in Washington, D.C. as a city dweller at heart and moved to Dallas with a family in 2019. At Shapiro and Company Architects, Fiona serves as a principal, providing firm-wide leadership, driving design innovation, and guiding the firm's expansion into Dallas. The City of Dallas is about to launch the process to rewrite our zoning ordinances. This is the beginning of a multi-year process, which will conclude with a completely fresh set of rules, responsive to the current needs and shared vision we all have for our city. To assist the city, the Dallas Housing Coalition is conducting in-person and virtual forums to educate and inform the public, providing the insights and tools to enable you to participate effectively in the rewrite process when the city conducts its town halls next year. So to get started, Abigail, why zoning?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Kevin. So I think we wanted to start kind of at a high level here. So why do we have zoning? Why do we care what zoning is? And as we look forward at Dallas's zoning reform, why does it matter to us? How will it change what we see in the built environment? So just want to emphasize that zoning is local rules that govern how land can be used. So the city of Dallas, when we're talking about it, is just the city of Dallas. It's not affecting Plano, Frisco. So every jurisdiction has local rules that will impact the zoning. So just a reminder as we look forward that this is hyper local and in the community that we're talking about. And in general, the idea here is to promote public health, safety, general welfare, make the city or the area a great place for everyone to live and for everyone to work, visit. And it does that by organizing land use. And so it's separating different uses, commercial, residential, industrial, into different areas, separating incompatible uses. Maybe you don't want to live next to a factory. And it helps with regulations for all of these areas about what things could look like, how much space they take up. We'll get into more detail on some of those. But also just want to note that there are a lot of opinions that goes into this. Like Kevin and Brian said, this is a long process for this Dallas zoning reform. We're thinking it's going to take probably 2 years from this point to get to a final one. And that's maybe best case scenario because a lot of it depends on what everyone thinks is the highest and best use for each piece of land. So what we really want to see there, what is this land really good for, and how will it help the community? And just know that this impacts everything you do all day. So it's where you're going to work, where you live, how you're getting there, where you're parking, things like that. And it gets even further with air quality, what kind of businesses. So it really does affect everything in our built environment in everyone's day-to-day life. And so as a primer, what is zoning? Basically, it allows what type of project can be built where. So it's a single family house, if it's an office, a grocery store. And so here looking at the two images, the one on the left is taking a clip of Dallas's zoning map, and it's just north of Love Field. So there you'll see there's MF, which is multifamily zoning, R, which is single family residential. You see PDs, which we'll talk about a little bit. You'll see some other areas that are commercial. So you can see how these are very hyper localized. So one street over may have a different zoning than the other. And is that the way it makes sense? Or how do we move forward to make sure these things are cohesive and still make sense and allow the city to grow? And the image on the right is what we had worked through on the last few years with Forward Dallas 2.0. So this was kind of the guiding plan, talking about what maybe we would like to see in the city of Dallas. And just a reminder, that is not in place yet. So that's just a guiding document that as we move forward with these reforms, or if we look at certain changes, that's a guideline we can look at talking about, here's what people wanted. Maybe we can use these as we move forward with the reform, what makes sense in each area. Other areas of zoning, not limited to just what type of building is how a building could be located on a site. So if we have here setbacks, maybe 30 feet Or we have buffers. Sometimes you have areas that require, 10 feet and you have to plant a tree every so often to make sure that the uses are compatible when they're next to each other. So if you have multifamily next to single family residential, there's ways that in the zoning code treats that so that things make sense and you have great neighbors. And also designates minimum lot sizes. So that's something you've probably heard a lot of talk about with single family is, some of these lot sizes are larger. Do we need them on all areas? Does every new house we build need to be a mansion? Or are there some other areas looking at smaller properties or smaller homes that may help with affordability? And it also helps with the size of buildings. So zoning will dictate how many stories you can build, how much site you can take up, in addition to the setbacks that we've talked about. There's percentages that you could be on the site. So as the image on the bottom right shows, the site could take up 30%. So you can see where, if that's a commercial building or a single family house, how that fits on the site and what areas you're allowed to build. So if you go start driving through a neighborhood, you could say, oh, all of the houses, sit back 20 feet, or everything takes up this percentage of the plan and there's a lot of, grass, empty space. The zoning is what's dictating that. But it also touches on other areas of development too. So whether it's landscaping, parking, lighting, I know parking, we've had the reform already. So we've kind of talked in depth about some of those changes and making sure that's all incorporated as we move forward with the zoning reform. But we can also look at lighting. It may tell you, oh, you need to provide some lights along the sidewalk for people walking at night, but also your lights can't bleed out. We don't want you shining a spotlight on your neighbor. And then same thing with landscaping, how things are treated. Are trees required along the street? Are they required, when you're adjacent to a differing use? All of that could be captured within the zoning code, and it is in many areas for Dallas. And also, just as a primer, types of zoning. Currently, we have what's called Euclidean districts. So that's kind of the traditional zoning where each thing is separated into use categories. You have a residential area, commercial area, something for industrial, different areas. And that's what I showed in that original. So it dictates what type of building could be built. And then from there are separate requirements, and they may all vary and differ. What's allowed for the single family residential may not be the same requirements that you're looking at for this multifamily or larger density residential. Another type of zoning, and what's more discussed in For Dallas 2.0 and used in some other areas in Dallas, is form-based districts. So that regulates kind of how the buildings are placed on the site, what they look like, instead of just the land use. So this is more about how the buildings and public spaces interact, how things are set back from the street, how tall they can be, but maybe one of them could be a coffee shop next to a house or next to a duplex. And so this gives a little more flexibility while still keeping the character and the size and everything that people really like to see in their neighborhoods. And the one other thing that's kind of an albatross in the city of Dallas is the planned development districts, or what you'll hear referred to as PDs. So these are a custom zoning for a small area. So it could be several sites together. It could be as small as just half an acre, one site that's a business going in. So what that does is it creates a custom zoning district for that specific piece. And so it may be a PD that's the same as everything around it, except they needed a different parking requirement, or it could be something totally different that they wanted to build, something that didn't align with the zoning code at all. And so they worked through this. A PD, just as a reminder, is kind of a long process. You have to submit it many times to the city, go through boards, things like that. But you will see a lot of those in Dallas, over 1,000 in pretty much all areas of the city and all types of construction, just because the current zoning is very strict. And so if you want to start changing one or two things to make your project work, it will require a PD. And the last thing, there are some overlays. We won't go into too much depth on these, but just know, historic districts, neighborhood stabilization, conservation, all of those will also impact zoning in a way that's not a broad stroke. And maybe they are certain areas. Two that we will highlight today: special use permit. You might hear quite a bit about. This has to do a lot with restaurants, and it's basically when you already have zoning that'll allow a certain type of use, but it's requiring saying, hey, you need to do an extra application here to use it in that area. So it's not necessarily going as far as a PD and saying you have to rewrite everything, go through a million steps, but it is something that requires some additional approval for each area. And then accessory dwelling units and having an overlay for those. Currently, I believe it's each neighborhood can opt in if they would like to, so it's not a broad stroke across the city. But this is allowing small units, maybe at the back, a garage apartment on each site, which does allow some flexibility for maybe younger generations, or maybe your grandparents are living with you. So it'll help build some density and allow some other dwelling options in existing neighborhoods. And so we've talked kind of about what the zoning is. If you're curious on, where you live, where you work, what is the zoning? Why does this neighborhood look the way it is? Here's a QR code. It'll also be in the slides we send out later. But when you pull up the Dallas map, so this is what it will look like. You can kind of see the outline of the city. So that shows you, something in Garland or Richardson's not included in this. They'll have their own zoning code. And for now, we're focused on Dallas because they have the upcoming zoning reform, but just know some of these principles may apply to other areas as you start looking at things. And so you can always search your address, you can search any, and then over on the left, you can turn on all sorts of layers and see what's going on with your area. And so currently Dallas's zoning, I will say, first of all, very outdated. The current version with only a few minor updates is from 1980s. So the city of Dallas doesn't look the same as it did then. There's a lot more people, a lot more development. And also I think we have different wants than we did. So you can kind of see what it looked like in the 80s. It's not what Dallas looks like today. And do we want to continue to grow and adapt as a city? And if so, I think the zoning code and zoning ordinances are a great opportunity to continue the growth and make sure it's in the way that we would like it to be. Also, it's very confusing and restrictive. So I think as you saw in the maps we looked at earlier, there's a lot of PDs, a lot of different zoning, may depend street by street. And so how do we simplify this? Because the more restrictions we put on each piece of property, the more confusing it is, the longer it takes to develop, and also just the harder it is. So the more checkboxes you put on each site, the longer it's going to take and the less people who'll be able to work on it. So I think if we want to start encouraging smaller development, if you and your neighbor want to build something together, we can't make it as complicated as it is, because otherwise we're just going to get only the certain number of people who can do those sort of things. And so here's just a quick snippet of some areas that have PDs and SEPs. So these are the areas that aren't relying solely on the base zoning, that had to create some sort of special rules. So you can see it's very prevalent in the city of Dallas. And so this is a challenge for everyone now trying to build something, is navigating the original zoning, and trying to see if they need to submit one of these and come up with a PD themselves. But if we can make it simpler, maybe we kind of reduce the number of these that we use in the future. But I did just want to note, these will probably not go away. The zoning reform will not change the existing PDs as a broad stroke. We'd have to go through a separate step for those. And also there's a lot of non-conforming uses with the current Dallas zoning. So you have existing buildings and businesses that are in limbo that may not exactly comply. I think you see it in the news quite a bit with some areas that, we've seen with parking, that some, to-go restaurants can't have a table for you to sit down and eat your sandwich because of the way the zoning is written and the way they're existing. And so that's kind of an opportunity, but also some lots are not buildable. So we talked earlier about how single family, a lot of these lots have minimum lot sizes. And so just looking at a neighborhood kind of in West Dallas, these red lots are ones that are smaller than what the current zoning says your minimum needs to be. So we need to look at some opportunities for these areas, and can they be built? And these are all empty lots. So these are opportunities to build more housing, which all housing helps with our affordability. And also, it's just, we want a modern Dallas, and there's a lot of things that people would like from a modern Dallas that aren't necessarily compatible with the current zoning ordinance. So we're missing several types of housing. I think everyone's heard about or seen missing middle housing. We've seen different housing options from single family all the way up to large multifamily, but right now we're not having some of those duplex, fourplex that people would really like in kind of smaller neighborhoods that they could then walk to things, and that we're not concentrating solely on two types of housing. We're filling in this broad spectrum, which will help fill in all of the kind of different costs and affordability options for the city. But also we're looking for options for walkable neighborhoods. This is an example of Elmwood, which now has quite a few retail, coffee shops, little restaurants. And so I think a lot of people would like to see that in their neighborhood, that they could go, you're working from home in the morning, you can go get a cup of coffee, walk, not have to drive. But not all areas of the city allow something like that to happen. So if we update the zoning code, that's something that we can start looking forward to, is maybe some options to integrate different things, whether it's different types of housing or commercial areas within our neighborhoods. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Fiona to start the more forward-thinking presentation, now that I've kind of shown you the
Thank
problems
you.
and where we're currently at.
Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Kevin, for the intro. So goals for zoning reform. This is the exciting part for us as designers on this panel, of being a part of this conversation early on. It's a long game, but I think if we're thinking ahead and talking amongst ourselves about what we want to see, we'll have a better chance at getting that into the zoning reform. So we appreciate you all being here. So I'll cover goals for our zoning reform, and we can just kind of fast forward through the points. But, you know, Abigail mentioned simplifying a lot of the confusing, restrictive current codes that are 26 years old in the city. We want more housing and housing types, and create opportunity to build on some vacant land that's not currently buildable. We'd love more walkable neighborhoods. That's something, you know, from urban planning, just really important for a city to thrive, to have connectivity between neighborhoods. All those things start with these conversations. And then design standards, you know, this is, again, the part that excites us, is how to be a part of setting those design standards. What do we want Dallas to look like in the future? You know, we have that opportunity to kind of determine and guide and consider. So be creative from the exterior, but also for us, design is, you know, looking at all the different home choices available on a lot and what makes sense for that neighborhood, not just the current neighborhood, but the neighborhood of the future in that area. And then we want to try and implement more of the comprehensive land use plan for Dallas. There was a lot of work put into that. So we want to make sure that we're walking in stride with the land use that we're aiming for. And so at the bottom there, you'll see it says simple, clear, future ready. This is directly from the City of Dallas zoning reform website, and it's nice and simple. And I think we're going to go into a couple of slides next that cover some of these goals that the city has, but also our coalition would be excited to keep talking about together. So the next slide is simple neighborhood housing. You know, Abigail has touched on this already, about the restrictive nature of our current zoning code. So I just kind of use Civic Atlas. It's a tool. There's a lot of AI tools out there now. This one specifically looks for what's going on in the zoning applications. And it was just a very long laundry list of denials, where a lot of, you know, single family residential zones were trying to do something a little bit more, like add more home choices to it with, you know, like a mixed use, you know, zoning or multifamily. And so if you go to the next slide, in addition to just a lot of those restrictions and then the difficulty of getting through zoning, as Abigail had another slide with all the PDs in the area, you can see that it's not very clear where we want home choices to go. People are just kind of creating PDs to kind of get through what zoning's, you know, restricting them on, but there's no cohesion. And so the neighborhoods and the plan for the future isn't really set right now in Dallas. And so this is our opportunity to kind of address that head on. I also put a little slide on the right about the vacant land in Dallas. There's 3,200 vacant, no, 32,000 vacant lots currently in Dallas that may or may not be buildable right now with the current zoning code. So, you know, thinking about like a stronger urban core, urban infill. There's a lot that we can do just in the boundaries of the city of Dallas without having to leave it, and address a lot of the housing needs that we have in our country. In the next slide. So we talked about the simplification, we're talking about the clarity, and now building for the future, where we see the need would be more home choices in between those higher dense mid to high rise multifamily developments, and then our single family neighborhoods that are prominent in the city of Dallas. So what's happening and where can we kind of add in some more home choices in between those two? And the next slide. Oh, this one, back one. There we go. So this slide kind of shows you the opportunity of being able to address new zoning options and home choices for us in the single family areas and the lower density areas of the city. Obviously, to the left in yellow is kind of what we're honing in on today. To the right, you know, I think with PDs and, you know, or all of that work has kind of paid off to some respect, but we want to address where Abigail mentioned the form-based district. So more of less restrictions on the land use and more about design and contextual consideration with the surrounding neighborhood. So that's the yellow portion of what we'll focus on today. And then the next slide kind of takes a stab as a designer at like, what would we do with one of these vacant lots? And so again, our goals with the zoning reform would be walkable connectivity, more home choices. And so if we look at this lot, it's currently for sale. There's quite a few options and creative solutions we can come up with for these tucked narrow sites. I'm sure a lot of you in the coalition have already heard of these terms, but the different housing typologies can be the duplex with an ADU, so kind of maxing the amount of units available on the site using ADUs or duplex style homes. There's also the cottage court, which is very kind of small, almost like tiny single family homes that are clustered together with a shared parking area. So it's not a parking spot per home. It's more of a walkable kind of little nested community within a lot. The other options could be a fourplex. So, you know, depending on the area, this one in particular had single family on either side of the lot and then more multifamily towards the back. So there's an opportunity to explore that and decide with this lot in particular what we want to see here and how many units we think that we could meet housing needs for. And then on the right would be just a small multifamily apartment. There's a lot of opportunities as designers to explore like modular construction or just kind of unique with some of the new approvals that have recently occurred. We can explore like single stair egress and up to 8 units using the IRC. So there's a lot of creative ways that we can address a small tucked lot and kind of look at it differently than what it's typically been allowed in the zoning code. If you move on to the next slide. So this is a case study I thought I'd highlight. It won the AI Designing Award in 2017. This is for permanent supportive housing, but I thought it was an interesting kind of look at the cottage court typology that's happening. And this one's in Dallas. If you're ever curious about it, I definitely recommend looking it up. Next slide. Okay, so this one's another site that I personally looked at with a wonderful nonprofit called Home Point in Dallas. They're permanent supportive services group. And so this is where we look at not just single vacant lots in the city, but also how can we merge lots together and maybe expand that idea to a bit more of a, you know, multifamily scale. So this is Cleveland Point. We took 2 single-family lots and merged them together. There's opportunities with transit-oriented connections that allowed some favor with the current zoning code, but this same strategy can apply throughout all of the city of Dallas. And I'll just keep us high level for the sake of time. And so looking at it, we were able to get 24 units on those 2 lots. And it's geared towards senior affordable, this one in particular, but a lot of opportunity to kind of help build community in Dallas, looking at things a little differently. And then another idea for merged sites would be stacked towns or townhomes. So again, there's so many different housing typologies that we can explore with the zoning reform and try and think ahead of what we want to see, where we want to see it, and then communicate that to the city of Dallas so that we can get some of these things kind of set up for success. This one in particular, I thought I'd highlight. Our studio created this prototype, and it appears like a traditional townhome, but it's actually units stacked on each other with a tucked garage in the back. So it adds a lot more density than a traditional townhome would. Something that, again, you know, as designers, we really can start thinking outside the box to what the city needs and how we can partner with you all to make these housing choices happen. And this is the last slide for me. So a case study similar to what I was describing with a merged site. It has kind of 2 rows of these townhome or town stacks. This is in near Belmont Park in Northeast Dallas, and it's called the Collection Dallas. So some of these things are happening, and I think what we would love to see as designers is how can we make a cohesive, you know, impact with the zoning reform and kind of address these things in advance. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Abigail and Fiona. In a minute, we're going to open it up for questions from our viewers. There are multiple ways that you can connect and support this initiative by the city. There's a slide here that I'm not going to read off everything here, but there are going to be multiple additional Dallas Housing Coalition supported presentations in person. Next year, the city of Dallas will kick off their own process of soliciting public opinion and engagement. If you do want to contact your city council member direct, I absolutely encourage you to do that. And you can see the ways to do that here on this slide as well. Do please get out. Do please support the initiatives and to create a better, more livable city of Dallas.
Thanks, everybody. So I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. We'd love to open it up to any questions from our live audience members who are here in our Zoom room. Any of our coalition members has any? I'll ask the question aloud for our live audience, and then the panel can chime in.
Sure. So this is from Nicole Kelly. Our question is, in adding more units via focusing on different housing types, what also needs to be part of the conversation with Dallas to ensure added density translates to affordable options and not just more expensive townhomes or rentals?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start here. So unfortunately, we can't limit the new construction to just affordable options. So unfortunately, you are going to get some more expensive townhomes and rentals. But in our opinion, by removing some of these barriers to entry, so some of the complication with the zoning, some of the complication to get a site built, does open it up that more affordable developers or even smaller people could build. And so there is that option there that making things simpler, taking less time, always leads to some sort of cost savings. But also in general, just more housing leads to more affordable housing. So I think you've seen this, and I know it's a little hard to see when everyone's rent keeps going up, But the city of Austin, for example, built a lot, and a lot of it was concentrated on some of these luxury high rise. But as an overall city, they saw reductions in their rent. And if anything, people's rent stayed the same year over year. So I think there's kind of multiple parts to this. There is the option of making it simpler so that more people could develop. It's easier to develop some affordable projects, but also just know that we need all housing types. And if we focus on one or the other, it doesn't lead to a robust system within the city of Dallas. So the zoning reform could lead to more housing options, simpler housing, but also just more overall.
I'd love to add to that as well as an architect who works on affordable housing. I think adding to the conversation would be making partnerships early on, getting everyone in the affordable housing space involved, and kind of get ahead of the game, so that there's more opportunity to kind of address, not just new development, but community preservation. That's very important, and something, especially as we're starting to develop more in South and Southern Dallas, we want to ensure that we're preserving communities and improving them at the same time. And so I would just encourage you, Nicole, to bring everyone into the conversation, to these community talks, because the more awareness there is, the better chance we'll be able to get ahead of the affordable housing needs in our city.
Thank you. We have another question from Mary Brumbach. What ideas are being explored for land use on nonprofit land? For example, church acreage, private schools, higher education, and yes, in God's backyard.
Guess I can start again unless Fiona, you wanted to take it away, but I think we are starting to see that come up now, even with the existing zoning. I'm not as in the weeds with some of the church and higher ed, but I know also City of Dallas is looking at selling quite a bit of their land or partnering with different companies to have more housing. Same thing with DART. And I think one of the other topics that's already been addressed a little bit by the city is when we talk about parking, areas that are close to train stations, we would like those to be denser. It'll support both the housing or the businesses there, but also support our public transportation, which I think is important as the city of Dallas grows. And so DART is also working to utilize some of their open land for housing. So I think all of those are great ways to continue to build housing in combination. But I think the nonprofit land is still going to be tied back to those same zoning reforms that currently it may not be zoned for a way that could add a dense housing or even more housing that we need. So I think all areas of the city will benefit from zoning reform, and those will be one that benefit as well, in addition to efforts they're already going through.
I can piggyback again because I have worked with a few nonprofit, specifically churches in Dallas and Texas, and it's always about the developing partnership that they put together to be able to successfully get through a housing development on their land. And so I'd say as far as ideas being explored for land use on that land, it would be bridging those gaps of, educating our nonprofits on development, and connecting them with those who are, savvy in housing development to help them across the finish line. And so these barriers that the zoning reform will reduce will help those developing partners support the nonprofits with their housing goals. So all of this ties back to this zoning reform, because unless we reduce the barriers, it's really hard to pencil out any of these deals.
Another question, a little more, I believe Jacqueline Garcia is asking a deeper dive on a design question. And she says, can 3D printing residential developments address housing shortages in Dallas?
It's hard to ask an architect that. I would say there's case studies out there. 3D printed homes are happening, and it's definitely, from a creative solution, something to look at.
Yeah, so I'll add, they are doing some, I know there's some kind of single family residential communities outside of Austin. If you want to look into, I don't know that we've seen any 3D printing on kind of infill sites or some of these more urban areas like we've been talking about. But there are other kind of non-traditional building methods that we are starting to see. So I know Fiona touched a little bit on modular. That's always an option, whether it's modular for, the whole dwelling unit comes in on site and is built somewhere else, or if maybe we're building some of the walls off site. We're starting to see some of that come through in and make some of these affordable projects. I will say the construction industry is sometimes a little slow, especially on the housing side, to adopt new technologies. So it's slow going, but we are starting to see some interest in some projects using non-traditional methods to help with construction.
I would add to this. I don't think technology is the problem here. I think the ability to construct, especially on these infill sites, is fairly well in hand with the current technologies, or the addition of potential modular or panelization or the printed housing. I think really we need to address the availability of land, and the fact that's what this is all about, that we need more opportunities, more variety, and more opportunity to use the land that we already have in the city that is being locked down by our current zoning. So it's not a technological issue in this particular case. It's the time it takes to get a piece of property of this scale, this small scale, to be usable for us to be able to add housing to it. While we wait for another question, Fiona, I wanted to piggyback on something you said earlier. You talked about the IRC and that it already allows something in housing via the IRC. What's the difference in the IRC and what we're trying to do with the zoning reform?
It's more about just cost to build. I'd say it reduces the cost to build, so it's not necessarily related to zoning. But when we're looking at smaller lots, we need to, from a development point of view, you have to look at the whole project cost, including the path to getting entitled or get through zoning. And so, wins like the, 8 units to be considered under the IRC does help reduce those overall costs so that more development can be pursued in the city of Dallas.
Thank you.
Same with single stair egress. It's really about the building code at that point, not zoning. But I think they're both serving the development goals of these smaller lots. IRC is the International Residential Code. So the amount of units you can build under a residential code, which is essentially a single family code. So it's less restrictive life safety requirements, sprinkler systems. So that's the benefit. Instead of typically an 8-unit building would trigger the IBC, which is the International Building Code. So it's a more commercial grade code. Thank you for your question.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's a great answer. While we wait for another question, Abigail or Fiona, is there something do you want to take a deeper dive into while we're waiting for another question?
I mean, not necessarily. I think we're really excited, and we hope that this presentation today brought some ideas or questions. And if you're too shy to type a question in the chat, you're welcome to email any of us. Our contact information will be on the slides, or we hope to see you in future events for Dallas Housing Coalition. But I think this is a great opportunity for the city of Dallas, and I know we're all passionate about having housing for everyone and continuing to make sure that Dallas has availability for everyone to move and live and meet their affordability needs. So we're excited that this is a great opportunity to continue that effort that we've been working on with different items over the last few years.
One question that we've gotten at a lot of our in-person community talks is how what's being built in many neighborhoods isn't reflective or doesn't fit into the context of the existing neighborhoods. Do y'all have any thoughts on why there might be more modern boxy townhomes being built, and what an architectural solution or two might be to that in the zoning reforms?
Yes, so I think part of that goes back to the simplicity that we talked about, where a lot of those sites where you see townhomes, maybe they weren't allowed to build that many units by right. So they had to go through the PD process. And so when you start adding those barriers of entry, now it means every, month we have to wait for an answer, every application we have to do, we now need to make more money to cover ourselves on the end. So I think some of that is just if I have to ask for something else to build, I'm going to ask for more and I'm going to try and get the maximum I get out of a site. But I think what we showed earlier with form-based zoning is a great opportunity to help contextualize some of these developments where we're talking about not necessarily what exactly is going on that site or the number of units, but we're looking at setbacks and overall building height. And maybe then it does define the building outline and size, but not necessarily what goes into it. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to continue development in a way that does work with the context and that it is maybe dependent on areas of the city and not necessarily, just we need a certain lot size that we currently have.
Yeah, and to add to that, PDs, it's kind of a free for all of what gets approved, so it's harder to get a handle on the context because the nature of a PD is just on that lot, whatever you want to do. So you don't have to think about the context. But if we reduce the need for PDs and we have a more cohesive, form-based zoning code, we can actually stay ahead of what's being developed and what it looks like. I also find there could be an opportunity to take a deeper dive in the character. There's some gorgeous neighborhoods in Dallas. If we dive into those neighborhoods and pull out characteristics that we all love and cherish and want to preserve, that could inform future design as well. So almost create, we have an opportunity to create what what Dallas of the future should look like. Right now it's just happening whether we like it or not. But with the zoning reform, even the city of Dallas is really interested in discussing design and how to create regulations or guidelines in design. And so that's where we can come in and say, well, this neighborhood, there's these characteristics, this proportion, this sloped roof, these detailed, elements that we would love to maintain for all new projects in certain districts and kind of get ahead of what's happening currently. Let me know when we do that together. I'll be a part of it.
Absolutely. And one last question from Mary, and then I'll do some closing announcements.
So Mary Brombach asked, any thoughts on conservation zones for housing types?
So we do have a little bit. When you're saying conservation zones, it's keeping the existing type of housing, or if we're looking for a certain style, and I think all of that could be addressed in the upcoming zoning. I don't think this zoning reform is going to say you can build unlimited things in all areas of the city. I think a lot of it will be going back to some of what that Forward Dallas 2.0 looked at was how do we transition from less dense areas to more dense and having things in between. So I think it's not going to be a broad stroke across the whole city. Not every area is going to look the same. And I think we could be intentional on how these areas are divided, how the form-based code works to make sure that everything is fitting again with that context and the existing housing types.
Yeah, and we want to be careful not to, overlays do cause barriers. So it's kind of that fine line of what do we want to preserve with the flexibility of interpretation almost to allow development, because it can work the opposite direction if we create too many approval committees and go that route. But I wanted to expand a little bit more about the question Brian asked about the contextual neighborhoods. And I think that what comes up to mind is walkability, but connectivity to the neighborhoods. And so continuing conversations with DART. DART was brought up earlier by Abigail, but they have future stations planned or, goals, I'll say, to add future stations. They have vacant land or underutilized land. And so thinking about the connectivity, I think, is going to make that contextual neighborhood more successful. And so making sure that not just the walkability within where you are, but how to connect to the nodes within Dallas would be an important part of that. And then how they relate to each other, both from a design point of view, but just access and amenities too. I think I skipped through some of the slides where there was pretty far-reaching amenities on some of those lots. And so when Abigail mentioned, instead of restricting the use of the land, maybe the form, if you have a coffee shop in your little neighborhood, that's technically not a residential use, but it serves the neighborhood as an amenity. And so that helps with walkability and connectivity as well.
Well, thank you, ladies. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you here today. Brian, turn it over back to you.
Well, as a reminder, our motto is Dallas is big enough for everyone. If you're not already one of our 395 members of the Dallas Housing Coalition, we'd love to have you join many of the organizations that are represented on screen here, so you can attend future lunch and learns like this one that we host semi-regularly to keep our members up to date on timely topics affecting the city of Dallas and our housing ecosystem. Next slide. If you have not yet attended one of our zoning community talks in person, we still have 4 remaining. Next Monday night at the Jewish Family Services, next Tuesday night at Wilshire Baptist Church in East Dallas, the following week at Ferguson Road Initiative on Monday, November 10th. And then our last one is at Reverchon Recreation Center in Uptown, also accessible to Oaklawn and downtown. So they're all 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And I'll include the link to that for our folks watching in the chat if you want to join. And you can find this by going to bit.ly/Dallas Talks Zoning. And our 2 summits coming up that we hope all of our members will sign up for. The first is Friday, November 21st. From 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. we'll be at UNT Dallas for our 2nd annual housing summit. This year's theme is growth without displacement. As Abigail mentioned, not only is our zoning code extremely old, Dallas's population has grown from that time from around 900,000 people to 1.3 million. So how do we protect our legacy businesses and residents who have lived here for generations? That will percolate its way through a variety of breakout sessions, including can multifamily and single family housing coexist? How do we activate vacant and underutilized land, and other timely topics? So breakfast and lunch is included, as well as an afternoon reception. If you go to bit.ly/DHC Summit 25, you can purchase your ticket today. We also have exhibitor and sponsorship opportunities available. If you're interested, just reach out to me at brian@DallasHousingCoalition.com. And we understand that one is on a Friday, so if you can't make it on a Friday, we do have a resident housing summit. This will bring back together the facilitators of our in-person zoning 101s. We'd love to have the folks here, our panelists, join if they're interested in hearing what some of those resident concerns have been. We'll be at St. Paul United Methodist Church in downtown Dallas from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That is free to attend, and breakfast and lunch is included with that. We'll do some community visioning about what types of reforms people might like to see in their neighborhoods, what new types of missing middle housing, because it used to exist in Dallas in many of our historic districts. And then the new zoning codes and single family only zoning took that away. So it's really a return back to how many of our cities were developed originally. And hopefully that resonates with you all who are watching today and online. So if you can make that, that one is available on a Saturday, the next day. Both of those are the week before Thanksgiving. And we'd love to see you there. We do have a small honorarium we can give to people who want to attend the Friday Summit. That is also accessible. So just email me if you'd like to take advantage of that opportunity. And again, thank you all for joining. We have our social media channels. If you're not already following us, please give us a follow. As long as if you're watching and want to become a member, you're aligned with our mission, vision, and values of a more attainable Dallas region from a housing perspective, both creating and preserving our attainable housing for all. We'd love to have you on board. Thank you again to our phenomenal presenters today, Kevin, Fiona, and Abigail, and you all for tuning in today. I will leave my email in the chat now for anyone who doesn't have it, and as a comment on our social media channels. But we'll turn off the live stream now. If anyone wants to hang out for 10 more minutes or talk to any of us afterwards, I will leave the Zoom room open a little longer. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks, Brian.